Known as the Perfect Prince, John II was an astute politician, wielding diplomacy and strategy with masterful precision. His reign, spanning from 1481 to 1495, marked a pivotal era in the Age of Discovery, as he confirmed Portugal's maritime supremacy in the Atlantic Ocean. John's visionary leadership solidified Portugal's position as a global power, ensuring control over key trade routes and expanding the horizons of exploration. This was the king who worked with the likes of Diogo Cão, Bartolomeu Dias, and Christopher Columbus, and that divided the world with Castile, cementing his place as one of the most influential rulers in world history. Today's video will dive into a life of ambition, intellect, and determination, which transformed the world forever. John II of Portugal was born in Lisbon in 1455 to King Afonso V and Queen Isabel. His early life foreshadowed a future of remarkable leadership. At just 8 years old, João was appointed regent from 1463 to 1464, while his father embarked on a crusade in Morocco. This formative experience introduced him to the complexities of governance. In 1471, João joined his father in a campaign that successfully reconquered the key Moroccan cities of Argila and Tangier for Christianity. That same year, he strengthened his political ties by marrying Leonor, the daughter of Fernando, Duke of Beja, a union that bolstered his influence within Portugal's nobility. João's leadership qualities shone even brighter in 1475 when he assumed regency as his father campaigned in Castile. He demonstrated his martial prowess once again in 1476 at the Battle of Toro, decisively defeating the most formidable wing of the Castilian Aragonese army. From 1476 to 1477, João essentially governed Portugal during his father's extended journey to France, even briefly becoming king during this period. By this time, João was already the de facto ruler of the kingdom, as his father increasingly entrusted him with Portugal's governance. Finally, on August 1481, João II ascended to the throne both de jure and de facto, marking the beginning of his reign. His early life and leadership, marked by military triumphs and political acumen, set the stage for the remarkable achievements of his kingship. In 1481, following the death of King Afonso V, John II quickly took steps to consolidate royal authority. He convened the Cortes of Évora to assert his power and address the imbalance created by Afonso's extensive grants of land and privileges to the nobility. To solidify his authority, João ordered the nobility to formally pledge their homage to him. This requirement was codified in a book that specified the timing and location of the event, a move that drew opposition, particularly from the Duke of Braganza, who protested the king's actions as an overreach of power. The Cortes marked a crucial time in João II's reign, as he sought to centralize control and curb the influence of the powerful aristocracy. Among the measures enacted, noblemen were forbidden from harboring criminals on their lands, a direct challenge to their traditional autonomy. Furthermore, they were barred from interfering in municipal elections, signaling João's intention to curtail their influence over local governance and strengthen royal institutions. Sometime after the Cortes began, a plague broke out in Évora, forcing the assembly to relocate to Monte Moro Novo. Despite these disruptions, the Cortes ultimately concluded in 1482 in Viana do Alentejo. The reforms implemented during these sessions, especially those limiting noble privileges, provoked significant backlash. The House of Braganza in particular viewed the king's actions as a threat to their power and began plotting against him. In October 1482, King João II convened new Cortes in Santarém. During this period, Lopo de Figueiredo, a servant of the Duke of Braganza, revealed to the king a conspiracy against him led by the Duke Di Fernando of Braganza. Further information came during Lent, when Gaspar Zuzarte, a nobleman, informed João II that his brother Pedro had carried details of the conspiracy to Castile, further implicating the Duke. Acting decisively, João II ordered the arrest of the Duke of Braganza on May 28, 1483. The Duke was brought to trial, judged by the most esteemed magistrates of the kingdom. Found guilty of treason, the Duke was sentenced to death. His execution, by beheading, was seen by everybody in Évora, serving as a dramatic demonstration of the king's authority and resolve. Following the execution, João II confiscated the vast wealth and properties of the House of Braganza. To ensure his dominance and quell any potential unrest, the king toured the lands previously under the Duke's control. During this tour, João II solidified loyalty by addressing local grievances, including the abolition of heavy taxes that had been imposed by the Duke. These actions not only reinforced his authority, but also improved relations with the local populace, strengthening the centralization policies he had been pursuing since the beginning of his reign. By eliminating one of the kingdom's most powerful nobles and winning the support of their former subjects, João II advanced his vision of a centralized and unified Portugal. João II's brother-in-law, Diogo, Duke of Viseu, was implicated in the 1483 conspiracy against the king. Despite knowing of his involvement, João II refrained from drastic action at the time, merely compelling Diogo to swear allegiance. The Duke, however, never admitted his role. A year later, João uncovered a new dangerous conspiracy aimed at assassinating him and placing Diogo on the throne. Acting decisively, on September 28, 1484, while the court was in Setúbal, João II confronted the threat personally. Taking justice into his own hands, he stabbed Diogo to death. The king also ordered the execution of other conspirators by beheading, signaling a zero-tolerance stance toward treason. In the aftermath, João continued his purge, arresting and executing others linked to the conspiracy over subsequent months. To secure his reign further, he established a personal guard composed of skilled and loyal warriors, including Afonso de Albuquerque and Duarte Pacheco Pereira. These men would later achieve fame as pivotal figures in the Portuguese Empire's expansion, particularly in the Indian Ocean. In the ordination of 1485, King João II enacted significant changes to strengthen his authority and symbolize a new era of centralized governance. He extended his royal title to include Lord of Guinea, reflecting Portugal's growing maritime and territorial ambitions along the African coast. This move underscored João's commitment to expanding the kingdom's influence and wealth through exploration. João also altered the heraldry of the kingdom to reflect his vision for a united and centralized Portugal. He ordered the removal of the Cross of the Order of Avis from the royal arms, a symbol introduced by João I to demonstrate that the monarchy was not tied to any single military order. Additionally, João removed several of the lateral shields from the coat of arms, as they reminded him of his father's wing's defeat at the Battle of Toro. The redesigned heraldry embodied his desire to move toward a new image of royal strength and unity. In his governance program, João emphasized the principle, by his law and by his people. This motto encapsulated the transformed reality of a kingdom united under a strong, centralized authority, heralding what João intended as a new chapter in Portugal's history. João II of Portugal prioritized securing Portuguese holdings in Morocco as part of his broader strategy to establish economic and political dominance in the region, rather than waging continuous warfare. To bolster the defense and settlement of strategic locations like Tangier, Ceuta, Alcácer Segre, and Asila, João II deployed hundreds of degradados, individuals convicted of crimes or socially marginalized, offering them pardons in exchange for their service. Tangier received the largest influx of these settlers, solidifying its role as a key Portuguese outpost. In 1485–86, the Moors of Azamor pledged their obedience to João II, leading to the issuance of a privilege charter that provided Azamor's inhabitants with a fixed annual payment of 10,000 saves, transported tax-free aboard Portuguese ships. His vision was to integrate these regions into Portugal's sphere of influence through strategic diplomacy and incentives. In 1486, Portugal acquired Mazagan, a crucial stronghold in later king's strategy for Morocco. Later, Mazagan became home to the most impressive Portuguese fort in the region, celebrated as one of the 7 wonders of Portugal. This fortress exemplified advanced military architecture and solidified Portugal's enduring influence in North Africa. 3 years 1489, João launched an expedition to build a fort on Graciosa, aimed at curbing Muslim raids on Portuguese ships traveling to Guinea. Although the fort was soon surrounded by forces from the Kingdom of Fez, João II opted for diplomacy when offered a peace treaty, avoiding further conflict. Portuguese reinforcements ensured the safe withdrawal of Graciosa's settlers to Portugal, with no financial burden on the crown. In 1490, Ceuta faced a siege by the King of Fez. In response, King João II organized a formidable fleet of 50 ships carrying numerous soldiers and horses to reinforce the fortress. Command of the relief effort fell to D. Fernando de Meneses, who initially planned an attack on the Alcaide Baraxa. However, upon receiving intelligence from Ceuta while still in Granada, Meneses learned that the attack on Baraxa was impractical. He redirected his efforts toward the village of Targa, a significant base for Moroccan corsairs located 40 kilometers west of Tetuan. As the Portuguese fleet approached, the inhabitants of Targa fled, leaving the town vulnerable. The Europeans achieved a resounding victory against the Wattasid dynasty, capturing 25 ships and a substantial amount of artillery. Many Christian slaves were liberated, and the village and surrounding fields were thoroughly destroyed. The Portuguese returned to Ceuta laden with riches, bolstering morale and resources. Following this success, Fernando, with the support of the governors of Tangier and Alcácer Seguer, launched another assault, this time on the mountain town of Comish in the Rif Mountains. Leading an expedition of slightly over 1,000 soldiers through a grueling march, they engaged and defeated more than 1,400 Muslim defenders. Around 400 Muslims were killed, 100 were captured. These victories devastated pirate strongholds that had threatened European lives and freed numerous Christian slaves. Fernando's campaigns were celebrated as acts of both strategic and moral triumph, avenging the continuous Muslim aggressions in Europe. King John began his reign with decisive actions to secure Portugal's growing influence in overseas trade. In 1482, recognizing the importance of protecting Portuguese interests along the West African coast, he ordered the construction of the fortress of São Jorge da Mina, St. George of Mina, in modern-day Ghana. This stronghold became a crucial hub for trade, particularly in gold, and ensured Portugal's dominance in the region, shielding it from other rivals. During the same period, João II sought to expand Portuguese knowledge of Africa's geography and potential sea routes to India. In Europe, rumors circulated that King Manicongo was a Christian. This intrigued João II, who sought to foster a positive relationship with the African ruler. He sent lavish gifts to the Manicongo, hoping to strengthen ties and establish an enduring alliance that would benefit Portuguese interests in the region. Between 1482 and 1485, the navigator Diogo Cão led 2 exploratory expeditions to the coast of Angola, conducting reconnaissance of the area. His first voyage, which ended in 1484, took him along the African coastline to the Congo River. Mistakenly believing he had found the passage to the Indian Ocean, Cão chose to return to Lisbon with this promising, though incorrect, assessment. Upon his return to Lisbon, João II rewarded Diogo Cão generously for his efforts. The king granted him an annual pension of 10,000 white reis and the prestigious right to bear a coat of arms, a significant honor that recognized his contributions to Portugal. These rewards underscored João II's initial enthusiasm for Cão's discoveries and his broader vision of maritime expansion. In 1485, Cão embarked on his second voyage. He sailed the Congo River, the deepest in the world, and initiated contact with local communities, laying the groundwork for a relationship that would last centuries. However, during this journey, he realized that his earlier assumption about finding a passage to the Indian Ocean had been mistaken. Continuing south, he reached Cape Cross in modern-day Namibia, before most likely returning to Lisbon. Despite his achievements, Diogo Cão's later years were marked by obscurity. According to historian Damião Pérez, João II grew disillusioned with Cão after the navigator's wrong conclusion of the first voyage, where he thought he had found a direct route to the Indian Ocean. This disappointment led the king to ignore Cão for the remainder of his reign, relegating the once celebrated explorer to historical obscurity despite his significant contributions to Portuguese exploration and diplomacy. After Diogo Cão's voyages along the African coast, João II ordered Bartolomeu Dias to continue the mission. In preparation for this challenging endeavor, Dias was appointed captain of the caravel São Cristóvão and received an annual pension of 6,000 white reis as recognition for the crucial role he was expected to fulfill. At the same time, Bartolomeu Dias was tasked with exploring the African coast. King João commissioned Pero da Covilhã and Afonso de Paiva to undertake a parallel mission to reach Ethiopia by traveling through the Mediterranean and Red Seas. Their goal was to establish diplomatic ties with the Kingdom of Prester John, a Christian kingdom believed to exist in East Africa. João II hoped to forge a powerful Christian alliance with this kingdom. Both men carried letters of peace from the Portuguese crown, demonstrating Portugal's intent to collaborate with Ethiopia against shared enemies. After a journey through the Mediterranean and the deserts of Africa and the Middle East, the two explorers parted ways in Aden, modern-day Yemen. Afonso de Paiva proceeded to East Africa, while Pero da Covilhã continued on to India. Tragically, Afonso de Paiva died around 1490, leaving Covilhã to continue the mission alone. Covilhã reached Ethiopia, but was prevented by the local ruler of returning to Portugal. Despite this, he would see the Portuguese one more time, though that time they were the ones who reached him, already around 1530. When it comes to Voyage of Bartolomeu Dias, it was launched in August 1487 and manned by the most skilled Portuguese pilots of the era, including Pero de Alenquer, Álvaro Martins, and João de Santiago. It is believed that the fleet sailed directly along the African coast, reaching Angola in December. Then significant landmarks were charted: Terra de Santa Bárbara on December 4th, Walvis Bay on December 8th, the Gulf of Saint Tomé on December 21st, Hottentot Bay on December 23rd, Angra das Voltas shortly thereafter, Elizabeth Bay on December 26th, Terra de São Silvestre on December 31st, and Serra dos Reis on January 6th, 1488. After January 6th, the expedition encountered a fierce storm that dispersed the fleet, forcing the ships far south into uncharted waters. Dias found himself on the southeast of Africa. Determined and resourceful, he ordered to sail up north. When land was sighted again, the crew realized they had rounded the southernmost point of Africa and entered the Indian Ocean, an unprecedented achievement. Dias and his crew continued exploring, identifying locations such as Fish Bay, Mossel Bay, and the Fish River. However, the crew, afflicted by scurvy and concerned about dwindling supplies, urged Dias to return. On the return journey, Dias took the opportunity to document and explore regions previously overlooked, including False Bay. Near False Bay, he encountered the treacherous cape he named the Cape of Torments, reflecting the dangerous storms faced there. Upon his return to Portugal in late 1488, King João II, recognizing the expedition's monumental accomplishment, renamed it the Cape of Good Hope, symbolizing the confirmation of the old conviction that India could be reached via the Atlantic Ocean. More impressive than all of this was that the myth that the civilizations of the Old World believed, which consisted in affirming that the Atlantic and Indian Oceans were not connected, was destroyed. Since 1488, preparations were underway for the marriage between Afonso, the son of King João II of Portugal, and Isabel, the daughter of the Catholic monarchs of Castile and Aragon. However, negotiations faced delays. The Cortes of Évora convened only in 1490, where the wedding was a central topic. João II sought financial support from the populace, raising nearly 40 million reais. He also made generous land grants to Afonso and Isabel. During these Cortes, the people urged João to require that their lords reside in their lands to better defend them. Another concern raised was the migration of farmers' sons to cities, leading to labor shortages in the countryside. To address this, João decreed that farmers' children should remain in agriculture. Additionally, criticism arose over uneducated magistrates who couldn't read nor write, prompting João to mandate that future officials must possess adequate literacy and training. In March 1490, Portuguese ambassadors traveled to Seville to receive the Catholic monarch's final decision and escort Princess Isabel to Portugal. Originally, the wedding was to take place in Lisbon, but a plague outbreak necessitated a change to Évora. To safeguard against the plague, the city was evacuated 15 days before the event. On December 28th, Isabel arrived in Évora, where extravagant celebrations unfolded for weeks. João II intended the wedding to be the grandest ever witnessed. Chronicler Garcia de Resende later wrote that such magnificence had never been seen in Hispania. Amid the festivities, King João fell gravely ill, sparking fears of plague, though it was later proven he had been poisoned. Though he recovered, tragedy loomed. In July 1491, the court relocated to Santarém, where disaster struck on the 11th. Afonso, aged 16, suffered a fatal fall from his horse by the Tagus River, between Alfange and Ribeira. The young prince's death devastated the kingdom, as he was João's only legitimate heir. His funeral was the most elaborate of the time, with his father personally accompanying the body in August to the Batalha monastery. Isabel, now a widow, returned to Castile at her parents' request. Queen Leonor, overwhelmed by grief, withdrew to the Paço de Sintra. The royal family's sorrow deepened as Portugal now lacked a legitimate male heir. Christopher Columbus, a Genoese navigator, arrived in Portugal in 1479. He represented the mercantile house of Centurione in the sugar trade of the Madeira archipelago. During this period, Columbus married Filipa Moniz, daughter of Bartolomeu Peristello, the first governor and discoverer of Porto Santo Island. This marriage cemented his ties to Portuguese exploration and commerce. In Portugal, Columbus honed his maritime skills, gaining vital navigational knowledge that would later be crucial to his ambitious voyages. Columbus was inspired by the ideas of Paolo dal Pozzo Toscanelli, who proposed that reaching India by sailing westward was the best option. Armed with this vision, Columbus presented his westward project to King João II of Portugal in 1484. However, João II, familiar with the hypothesis of westward exploration since at least 1474, rejected Columbus's proposal. At the time, Portuguese exploration was advancing under discoveries made by Diogo Cão, and João II believed that Portugal was nearing the Indian Ocean via an eastern maritime route. Undeterred, Columbus sought support in Spain in 1485. After years of negotiations, he secured a small fleet from the Catholic monarchs in 1491. Meanwhile, a curious episode unfolded in 1486 when João II organized a western expedition led by Fernão d'Olmo, a captain from Terceira in the Azores. D'Olmo was granted rights to lands he might discover west of the Azores, whether a new continent or the famed Antillia. However, there is no concrete evidence that this voyage ever materialized. Columbus's persistence bore fruit in 1492 when his revolutionary expedition reached the New World, landing in Cuba and Hispaniola, present-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Upon his return in 1493, Columbus stopped in Lisbon. João II summoned him to court, asserting that Columbus's discoveries fell within Portugal's sphere of influence under the Treaty of Alcachovas. This treaty, signed in 1479, divided the Atlantic between Portugal and Castile, granting Portugal exclusive rights to lands south of the Canary Islands. João II reconheceu o mérito do plano de Colombo e mostrou arrependimento por sua inicial rejeição. To assert Portuguese claims, João II was determined to prepare a fleet under Dom Francisco de Almeida to take possession of the newly discovered lands. This voyage would thus lead to diplomatic tension between Portugal and Castile over territorial rights. Following the voyage, the Catholic monarchs, Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand of Aragon, feared Portugal would challenge their claims to the newly discovered lands. To avert conflict, they quickly dispatched emissaries to Portugal to negotiate a solution. In response, João II sent 2 representatives to Barcelona, where the Castilian court was located, to open negotiations. However, at the same time, Pope Alexander VI issued the bull Inter Caetera in May 1493, which granted Castile rights to lands west of a meridian 100 leagues from the Azores or Cape Verde. João II opposed the papal bull, recognizing it as a direct threat to Portuguese interests. Recognizing the importance of maintaining peace, the Catholic monarchs proposed moving the discussions to the neutral town of Tordesillas. This arrangement was accepted by both parties. While both sides agreed to use the meridian of Cape Verde as the reference point for dividing the Atlantic, João II argued that the boundary should be moved further west, from 250 leagues to 370 leagues. The reasons behind João II's insistence on the 370-league demarcation have sparked considerable debate. Some historians speculate that João had prior knowledge of the Brazilian coastline through secret Portuguese explorations and reports from mariners. Others suggest he sought the additional space to exploit the Atlantic Gyre, a crucial wind system needed for his voyage to India. By securing a broader stretch of the South Atlantic, João ensured Portuguese dominance in the vital maritime corridor, creating a strategic advantage for future expeditions to India. The South Atlantic thus became a Portuguese mare clausum, restricting Castilian ships from interfering with Portuguese voyages. The Treaty of Tordesillas, finalized on June 7, 1494, divided the non-European world into 2 zones. Lands west of the 370-league line were assigned to Castile, while those east were reserved for Portugal. This boundary not only secured Portugal's monopoly over its maritime route to India, but also inadvertently ensured its claim over Brazil when it was discovered in 1500. The treaty highlights João II's strategic foresight and Portugal's determination to maintain its leadership in global exploration. By securing Brazil and safeguarding the South Atlantic, Portugal laid the foundation for its global empire, while Castile turned its focus toward the Americas. The Treaty of Tordesillas, a product of negotiation and geopolitical maneuvering, remains one of the most important documents in the history of the world. The final years of King João II of Portugal were marked by a succession crisis and personal tragedies. After the death of his only legitimate son, Afonso, João sought to legitimize his illegitimate son, D. Jorge, as his successor. D. Jorge, who had been removed from the court earlier to avoid upsetting Queen Leonor, was recalled to the royal court in 1490, where he was well received by the queen. However, the idea of D. Jorge becoming the heir faced strong opposition from the queen, who supported her brother Manuel, Duke of Beja, as the rightful successor. To strengthen D. Jorge's position, João bestowed significant honors upon him. In 1492, D. Jorge was appointed Master of the Military Orders of Santiago and Avis, and was granted temporary governance over the Order of Christ. These appointments gave him considerable military authority, potentially useful against opposition. However, resistance led by Queen Leonor and her supporters proved too much. João, weakened by an earlier poisoning and struggling with deteriorating health, lacked the resources and strength to counter their influence effectively. The succession crisis dragged on until 1495, with João ultimately recognizing Manuel as his heir in his will, signed on September 25th of that year. In his testament, João requested that Manuel take care of D. Jorge, but made no mention of Queen Leonor, suggesting strained relations between them. Hoping to recover his health, João traveled to the spa town of Caldas de Monchique, seeking the healing properties of its waters. He planned to meet Leonor and Manuel in Alcácer do Sal afterward, but was forced to stop in Alvor due to his worsening condition. There, on October 25th, 1495, João II died at the age of 40. He passed away in solitude, far from his family, a fact poignantly noted by chronicler Garcia de Rezende, who described his death as occurring in humble solitude. The exact cause of João's death remains uncertain. Chronic nephritis has been suggested, as well as edema, though suspicions of poisoning persist. The mystery deepens with the destruction of royal chancery documents from 1493 to 1495, a deliberate act by an unknown court member. This loss of records obscures critical details of João's final years, fueling speculation about intrigue and foul play. King João left a lasting legacy through his political acumen, visionary leadership, and transformative rule. His reign marked a decisive turning point in consolidating royal authority and advancing Portugal's position as a global power. He inherited a kingdom in which his father, Afonso, had ceded excessive power to the nobility. Recognizing this imbalance, João undertook significant reforms to strengthen the monarchy. He was both rigorous and severe in his application of justice, treating nobles and commoners alike under the law. Chronicler Garcia de Rezende noted that João was feared by the nobles but loved by the people, reflecting his commitment to fairness and justice. His personal symbol, the pelican, symbolized love for his people and underscored his dedication to their welfare. Though João II relied on the support of the Third Estate, he seldom convened the Cortes. His foreign policy was equally adept. João maintained excellent relations with Charles VIII of France and the Duke of Brittany. In 1489, he sent ambassadors to England to reaffirm the Treaty of Windsor, securing Portugal's long-standing alliance. He also dispatched embassies to Rome, many given the brevity of his reign. João's vision extended far beyond Europe. Under his leadership, Portugal achieved remarkable milestones in exploration. He financed expeditions to the Congo River, the world's deepest river, and orchestrated the daring espionage mission of Pero da Covilhã and Afonso de Paiva to gather intelligence about the East. Most notably, João supported Bartolomeu Dias's groundbreaking voyage, culminating in the discovery of the Cape of Good Hope, named this way by the monarch, which opened the sea route to India. One of João's most enduring accomplishments was the Treaty of Tordesillas, negotiated with Castile in 1494. This unprecedented agreement divided the world between the two powers, marking the first division of territories on the global scale. João's diplomatic prowess ensured that Portugal retained vital maritime routes and territorial claims, shaping the course of global exploration. Throughout history, the cognomen Optimus Princeps, the perfect prince, has been reserved for exemplary rulers such as the Roman Emperor Trajan. João II, often remembered by this title, earned it through his vision, justice, and unwavering dedication to his kingdom. His reign may have been short, but its impact was profound, securing his legacy as one of the most important kings in the history of the world.